Hello and welcome back to the Sales Wounds Deep Dive. My name is Julia Kline and I am doing a this Sales Wounds exploration today with Evie Burke. Evie, say hi to everybody.
Hello.
And full transparency, Evie is a client of mine already. I know her and a little bit about her sales wounds already, but we're going to go a lot deeper into them today. Before we begin, Evie, why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about what it is that you do for a living?
So I am a business coach. I work with entrepreneurs who feel like they've hit a brick wall in their business and they feel like they have the strategies and all of the what to do's down, but it doesn't seem to be working and they're not sure why. So I help them kind of break through those brick walls and have more success.
Excellent. Very good. And of course, the goal with this next 30 minutes or so, as it always is to identify and begin to clear your primary sales wound in such a way that it's really awesome and helpful for you, but also in such a way that it is beneficial and interesting and enlightening to all those who are watching this video. So it's a kind of a dual purpose and it works, which is kind of the cool thing about this work that we do. So let's just begin, Evie, with you sharing what you see at this point as being your primary sales wound and why.
My primary sales wound is the anti-selling wound. I very much do not want to come across as, that masculine, buy because I want you to buy and let me convince you. I really want people to be working with me because it's in their best interest. So I don't want to sell to people, and I'm worried about, coming across as pushy or that they'll feel, awkward about the process. So yeah, it's definitely the anti-sales wound, I think, is the primary one.
So threaded through what I hear you saying is that it's really important to you that the person who you're selling to, who's getting ready to be a client of yours, feels supported by you, and that you feel connected with them and you want them to feel good and have a good experience with you throughout the experience, beginning with the initial conversation in which you're talking about whether they're going to buy from you or not. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And of course, that I hear you saying that there is all kinds of possibility, if not a strong likelihood, that the person would feel the opposite when you're trying to sell to them, that they would feel pushed on and feel cornered and feel imposed upon, and in all kinds of ways wanting to get away from you while you're trying to make them stay. Is that right?
I'm afraid that they'll feel that way. I don't know that they actually do, but I don't want to ever have anybody in the position where they feel of any inkling of that. So I tend to back away long before anything would transpire where they might feel that way.
So when have you felt like that?
When have I felt like that? So the example that immediately comes to mind is actually one that, as it was happening, I kind of laughed about because I recognized what was happening. It was a coach who I had done a program with, and he had a team that would do the follow-up calls. And it was funny because the class I had taken with him was all about having the sales conversation with somebody and a script for that. And so when his salesperson called to ask me to come to the big event that he was having the next month or 2 months away, like I saw like, okay, he's following the script and he was trying to coach me into buying the program. And when I was trying to tell him I wasn't interested, he just kept trying to coach me into it. And it wasn't until I said, I said, you know how sometimes you get that feeling in the pit of your stomach where, you know, you're nervous and you know that it's the right decision to do something? And the guy's like, oh yeah. And so I could tell he thought, she's like, okay, you know, this is somebody who's totally on board here. And I said, I don't have that. And he went, oh, thank you. And the call ended. But it wasn't until like I said it like that. And so I laughed about it at the time, but I think it was somebody using the tools in a way that was kind of pushy. And, you know, I didn't appreciate that.
Yeah, and what I also am getting from what you're sharing is that, at least in this particular conversation, and probably in many that you've had that have been similar, the sales conversation was in no way, shape, or form helpful for you either. You didn't get anything out of the conversation. You just basically sacrificed 30 minutes or more or less of your time, of your life, in service of trying to tell this guy no. And you didn't get anything out of it, right?
Right.
So I think a really helpful distinction for you, which will be that the kind of sales conversation you're going for is one in which the sales conversation itself is actually helping the person. Not in that you are beginning to solve their problem for them in the sales conversation. We certainly don't want to do that for several reasons. But you are helping them in that you are helping them to understand the nature of their own problem better. Because when people, and especially with somebody like you, what you're selling is coaching services. And when somebody comes to you, they're just stuck. And they're not sure why. And there is undoubtedly numerous threads that are interwoven and bundled together. And there might be one thread that's like neon orange, and so it's sticking out loud, and they think that that's their big thing. But you, as the coach, you can see, well, okay, I can see that this one orange thread is getting all of your attention, but in reality, there's only one orange thread in this whole tapestry, and most of it is blue and green. And so if we just get rid of this one orange thread or weave it in so that it's appropriate, you'll be able to see the blue and green. And as a matter of fact, we've got a hole in the blue and green part, and that's what we need to address. And doing that process with somebody as your sales conversation is incredibly helpful, because it makes them think, oh my gosh, this is I have been trying, like my dress has been, like, it's been blowing air through it, and I've been thinking that the problem was this one orange thread because that's the only thing I can see. But obviously you've helped me see now that the reason I'm having a problem is because I've got a giant hole in some other part. Well, gosh, thank you so much. By any chance, are you somebody who repairs holes? Right? How does that sit with you?
That sits good. I missed some toward the beginning because I think my internet connection was going goofy, but I got the gist of it. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay,
and because you are somebody who has done a lot of study up until now about traditional salesmanship, I'd like for you to share with me, to what extent does what I just shared sound like something that you've heard before? To what extent does it sound different? And to what extent does it sound like something you've heard before but with a really key twist?
It sounds like something I heard before in the, you know, they walk away having identified at a different level, you know, what's going on. I'm thinking if there's a twist in there.
Well, does this in any way sound different to what I just said sound different, or is it like, yep, I know that?
It was kind of like, yep, I know that. Trying to think if there was nothing from the part that I heard. There was nothing that came up as.
Okay, so let me ask you this. If your goal and intention and purpose when you sit down to talk with somebody in a sales conversation is to help them identify their problems in a way that they haven't been able to see it before, thus making it possible for them to identify the right path for a solution. If that is your intention in a sales conversation, then where or for what reason do you experience any resistance in having that conversation? Or in what way does it feel to you as if people might try and run away? I know that in your head, you're telling yourself, they're probably not going to try and run away. They're probably not going to try and squirm. They're probably not going to think that I'm awful because I'm not an awful person. But in your emotions, in your heart, you feel like, oh God, they're going to be squirming. And that doesn't connect, right?
Yeah, it's usually at the end where they've identified something they need to work on. And I say, you know what, I can help you, and this is how. And, then we get into the sales objections. And so then I don't talk with them anymore about it. I'm just like, oh, okay, can I follow up with you in, 3 months or whatever.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you are comfortable with and good at and practiced at the part where you say, what you're focusing on is the orange thread, but that's not your real problem. The real problem is this hole that you're having. So you're good at that part and you do that part.
I don't say it like that. I guess that would be different because I'm not sharing, something where it looks like this is your problem, but and I know that, but it actually, let's look over here because that's the deeper part. Usually the way that my sales conversations go is they're not structured quite like that. So it's more about, where do you want to be? Where are you now? What's getting in the way? And what will change, what will be different if you address that.
Okay, so within that structure, that's a perfectly lovely structure to follow during a sales conversation. And the part of that is when you say to them, what is it that's getting in your way? Their answer is, it's my orange thread. And that is your opportunity to listen carefully to everything that they perceive, but then to respond as the knowledgeable expert who's not in the middle of the problem that they're in the middle of, and say, I hear you, that what you think is your main obstacle, the thing that's standing in your way, is this orange thread. But can I share with you how I can see how focusing on that orange thread has left you stuck in the problem. And would you mind if I have a little bit of a different perspective on what your problem is? Would you mind if I shared with you what I see as the problem beyond just the orange thread situation?
Yeah, that part's new. I haven't tried that before.
Okay, because that is, all right, so that is a part you need to start doing. Yes. Right? And so how does that feel to you? Does that feel doable and easy and like, oh yeah, sure, I can imagine myself saying that?
I can imagine myself saying that. Because it's new, I can also see myself getting nervous about it and tongue-tied around it.
Okay, great. Because it's new, or because there's anything about it that brings up anxiety?
A little of both.
What's the anxiety?
I'm not used to telling them, leading the conversation with my opinion.
Would it be fair to say that you're not accustomed to standing in the role of expert when you're talking to a potential customer?
Yes.
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 Okay. So try it on a little bit mentally. How does it feel to say, you know what? I'm good at this. And I understand the causes of your problems in ways that you can't quite see because you're in it. How does that feel to you, to be that person and be in that role?
It feels bigger in a good way.
It feels what in a good way?
Bigger.
Bigger. Ah.
Yeah.
Bigger. You're expanding more into more of who you really are.
Right. Like, like sitting up straighter, like, claiming the
Yeah.
space versus, you know, the shrinking and just
Yeah.
doing the observing role.
Oh, Evie, I have got chills all over, and my eyes are searching, but I'm you know, becoming emotional because this
Yeah, my
is
eyes
big
are
for you.
starting to water a little bit. Yeah.
This is big for you. So let's just, you know, hold this space and allow you to feel it a little bit. This is you becoming more of who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You have gifts. That feels like it's kind of shifting into place.
Yeah.
It feels like it's, you know, like you've put something on over your head and you're kind of like shaking it into place, straightening out the hem.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of, it's, you know, you're like, okay, I can wear this.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So now you are in the sales conversation and you've gone through your structure that you're already using and that you're familiar with, and which is great. And you've asked them the question. So what, you know, you've said, so where do you want to be? What are the questions that you ask again? Remind me.
I'm just remembering them off the top of my head.
Yeah. It's
Where do you want to be? What are some of the things that are getting in your way? What will change for you?
uh-huh. I think the first question is, where do you see yourself now? Where do you self, right? I think was what you said.
Yeah,
I mean, and also,
that could be where are you now?
uh-huh.
Where do you
Yeah,
want to be?
yeah. And you're describing a fairly common kind of, you know,
Right.
structure for a
Yep.
sales conversation. So, you know, where are you now? Where do you want to be? What do you see as the obstacles in getting you there?
Right.
And so what we've done is we've tweaked that segment of the sales conversation that you're currently having, where when they tell you, this is what I see as the obstacle, you say to yourself, that's great. It's wonderful that you've got that level of insight about yourself and that you can really see some of what your problems are. And I hear you that what you said was blah, 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 blah. And I actually view your problem a little bit differently. I'm not saying that that's wrong, that's a part of it, but I think there's something bigger going on. And I'd like to share with you what I see as some additional part of the reason that you are not getting from where you are to where you want to go. Would that be okay with you if I shared it with you? And they say, yeah, great, I would love it. And at this point now, does that feel comfortable to you to say that to somebody? Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So you share with them and you say, so I can see how this one orange thread looks like a big deal to you, but honestly, that is a relatively small problem. And what you might even do right there in that sales conversation is give them the answer to solve their orange thread problem. Because in most cases, the thing that is paramount, that they think is such a big deal, that is like, is actually something that's easy to solve. And you can tell them in 2 or 3 sentences, this is all you need to do to fix it. So we've just handled orange thread, but what I really see is that you've got this, you know, if now you just bring your eyes down over here, you've actually got kind of a big hole over here in this blue and green part.
Right.
And that's what we really need to do is we need to go in with blue and green threads. And what you need to be careful about is that, of course, this is delicate work. So you can't just like slap a plaid patch on there and think that it's going to be okay. I mean, sure, that's one way you could solve the problem, but it'll be kind of clunky. So what I can help you do is to very carefully weave new threads to fix this hole in such a way that it's not only repaired, it's actually better than it was before.
Right.
Is that something that you are interested in? Would that be something that you would be interested in having? Or you can even ask them at that point, which option do you prefer? Or you can say to them, once you've kind of given them your spiel, then you can say to them, okay, so at this point, what do you see as your options? And then you help them to list, and sometimes you do it literally on a piece of paper, help them to list, well, one option is that I just live with the big hole. I do nothing. A second option is that I slap a patch on it, which would be hiring somebody else who's presumably cheaper or not as good or takes less time or whatever, right? Just slap a patch on it. A third option would be that I work with you and, really fix this hole properly and in the way that I can see is really going to support me the best going forward. And then you say, great, yes, I would agree that those are your 3 options. Now, if you don't, and what you can even say to them is, it's wonderful to understand your options, but I'll tell you what I understand being a business owner myself is that sometimes knowing your options is only half the battle. Like trying to figure out, oh my God, which one's right and whatever, and thinking through the different pieces is actually a big job in and of itself. And if you don't take the time to think through the pros and cons of each of the different options, you might find yourself just treading water and not doing anything just out of inertia and overwhelm. Mm-hmm. So what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is to continue to help you by helping you to think through the pros and cons of these three options. And I get it that I am one of the three options. So of course I have a little bit of a biased opinion. I certainly would love if you decided that the resounding pros are under the option of working with me. But I also want you to know that I'm going to be objective here. My goal is to support you and to help you. And if the truth is that we decide, you know what, that the hole that you have here is not that big of a hole and you're just going to live with it, that's okay. I mean, you know, if that's really what's going to work best for you, I just want to help you get to that point. So is it okay with you? Will you accept my help right now? Let's take 5, 10, 15 minutes right now, just kind of talking through the pros and cons of these different options. How does that feel to you to say something like that to your customer?
That feels good, because I can, even as you were talking about it, I could think of, you know, the things that I know that are those other threads, that are those holes. Mm-hmm. So I already know that. So yes. It's not like I have to think about, oh, what would that be? It's like, no, I already know that. I don't necessarily know what their orange thread is, because right. That's their orange thread, but right. I know the whole. Right.
Right. So, okay. So I want to also circle back to this orange thread business, because it circles back to the conversation that we've had in our 4-week training program about features and benefits. So basically, describing the whole without ever having talked about the orange thread is talking about the benefits. Right. It's not wrong, but it's not going to land, because what the person really wants to hear about is the orange thread. You know? Okay. So, great. So you are comfortable saying to somebody, these are your three options that you have identified for yourself. And you might even suggest, you know, after they've told you what they see as their options, you might even offer, what about this other fourth option? You know, and they, okay, right, you're right, there's a fourth option. Great. So now we're going to go through the pros and cons. And you go through the pros and cons. And that's your opportunity to essentially solicit their buying objections. Because they're going to say to you, well, one of the pros with sitting with my hole is blah, 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 blah. And that's one of their objections. They're saying, my problem isn't so bad. I can tolerate it because. Mm-hmm. And that's your opportunity to say, I can hear you saying that the hole doesn't sound so bad, that there's a part of you that thinks that you could probably continue to tolerate that hole. But let me, you know, help you to see it. You know, let me show you a way in which this hole could get much worse quickly, right? Or as you're talking about the cons of your own service, they might say, yeah, well, yeah, the one problem with, you know, with what you've talked to me about is that I really, really want to focus on growing my Twitter following, and that's something that you've said you can't do at all. And you might say, whoa, no, I'm sorry, I must have misspoke. Actually, I'm particularly expert in helping you grow your Twitter following. Oh, really? I didn't hear that part. Oh, well, gosh, okay, well, that now goes in the pros column. You see what I'm saying?
Yep, they can bring, yeah.
And you want to be careful to not be contrary, right? So as they are listing their cons or pros to the other options, mm-hmm. You don't want to just jump in and say, oh, but wait, you're not thinking about that correctly, because actually that should be in the other column. You don't, because that will start to make them feel like, look, lady, I'm telling you my truth here, and you're just trying to talk me out of what I believe. So you want to do so very judiciously, you know? Mm-hmm. And if they bring up a good point, yeah, it's a good point. Or you can even use language like, you know, I thank you for sharing your truth about what you see as the pros and cons of these various things. And I really appreciate you being willing to be so honest with me. That's great. And it's really good feedback for me to hear how you are seeing this at this point. And if you don't mind, there's a few places where I'd like to clarify, you know, some of what you've shared, if that's okay with you. Oh yeah, sure. Please clarify. And then you can go into your whatever. The hole's actually going to get bigger because, or I actually help with the Twitter following because, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And then at that point, now, so they've told you about their orange thread, and you've already fixed that right there in the sales conversation. And now you've agreed that their real problem is this big hole, and they have named all of the possible choices that they could do once they finish the conversation with you, and you've talked out together the pros and cons, and then you've had your chance to respond to those pros and cons. So at this point, it should be really super clear in their mind what the right choice is. So now it's a really easy and natural thing to say, so are you ready to get started working with me? Because hopefully at that point they will have decided, well, that seems to be the obvious choice, doesn't it? And if they haven't, if something totally legitimate has come up, like, for example, let's imagine that, part of your solution requires them to have an on-staff database management person, right? Well, if they don't have that person, they don't have the resources for it, well, okay, this isn't going to work for you.
Right.
But if they've come to the conclusion that, yeah, working with you, that, including, which is the thing which is normally people's biggest objection, is the cost.
Right.
They'll get to that and they'll say, well, you are pros all the way, except you cost $25,000. That's a lot of money.
Right.
Great. Let's talk about that.
Yep.
So you get to that point and they say, are you ready to start working with me? And they either say, yes, here we go. And they, okay. And then you hand them the contract and a pen or whatever.
Right.
Or they say, this makes so much sense, but I really need to sleep on it. And then at that point, it's your choice whether you can let go at that point, which at this point in your path is probably what you would do. At that point, you would let them go. But, a few months from now, when you're more practiced at this new way of doing a sales conversation, you might respond to them by saying, what do you need to think about?
Right.
Not let them go. Because obviously, if they say, well, I still need to think about it, you haven't really identified everything.
Right. There's still an objection they're not sharing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how does all this feel to you at this point?
Good and doable.
Good and doable. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I believe you. Like, everything in your energy is completely resonant, completely in alignment. I agree with you that there's nothing about this at this point that feels scary or intimidating or anxiety provoking for you.
Yeah. No, nothing. It's
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
Wow. Well, there we go.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I guess I want to kind of wrap up by saying something about, does it feel to you as if you still are harboring an anti-selling wound? Does it still feel to you as if you have hesitancy about selling your stuff or talking to people about it or having these selling conversations?
No, I don't have hesitancy. I think anything that's left is more talking about the orange thread and not the hole.
Mm.
So, and that's what we'll be going over, in the upcoming program. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. I love doing these. This is good work, right?
It is.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much, Evie. I appreciate you being my guest on today's episode of the Sales Wound Deep Dive.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope that it has been as interesting and beneficial for you as it has been for Evie. And I encourage you to come on back for the next episode of the Sales Wounds Deep Dive, where we'll continue to explore other facets of our sales wounds. Thanks very much, and have a great day.